Yes, thank you, Alison. So it's a very fast talk. I tend to talk pretty fast and show a lot of slides, and my hope is always that there's at least one slide that you remember from my talk. You don't have to remember everything, but just one slide hopefully hits you in a new way. So what the hell are emulators? I'm going to talk a little bit about this today, but I'm also open to talking a bunch of other things, including startup VC operations in the neurotech space. Please come see me about that. Behavioral systems neuroscience. I'm a neuroscientist by training, along with other things. Computational neuroscience, of course, and what the hell are we trying to build here, digitized minds. Today's talk is quite focused. It's a little bit of an introduction because it's a mixed audience about what whole brain emulation is, kind of is. We're not still completely sure. The parallels between training or making whole brain emulators and language models. And then I'm going to talk about things that I'm learning about in the startup world, is 10xing whole brain emulation and then 10xing neurotech. I'm going to give you some ideas what I think what we can do. So what is whole brain emulation? I think Anders and Nick's roadmap is still fantastic for that. Very simply put, one sentence, the possible one-to-one modeling of the function of the human brain, capturing everything, the function, the consciousness, etc. The traditional way of doing this was to do scanning electron microscopy, basically kill the brain, kill the person, take the brain out, scan it, and do a bunch of things with reconstructing it and running some type of chemo biophysical simulation. The lo-fi approach is actually closer to systems neuroscience, which is you kind of observe the animals moving, you record live neural activity, neural dynamics, and try to build a model, like train something like that. And again, as Alison says, we're kind of approaching where these foundation models, language models, time series approximators are getting better, and they're kind of doing weird things that we didn't anticipate we could do without knowing the mechanisms of language and human thought. Another slide, I'm not an expert in this by far. Roughly, hi-fi structure looks something like this. We scan the brain, we reconstruct it. I always show this when I was at the Allen Institute for a while. I did some of this stuff, but not from the scan side, but from the functional side. You can run all kinds of funny-looking simulations. It's not quite sure what they do. The people working in this field, which again, I'm not one of the experts, we've just finally got about 1 cubic millimeters imaged from human. The mouse brain is about 400 times that. And this is rough approximations of what people think, 100 million, multiple hundreds of millions of dollars to about $1 billion. Simulating and emulating, which would be the next step after you construct it, it's not completely clear. And the timelines, I think 2 to 5, 2 to 8-ish. Yeah. Functional low fiberation, which is a little bit, which is exactly what I'm trying to do, is essentially fitting a behavior neural data to predict a model. So we want to have some kind of, a time series of where the animal time -101. So this animal is moving through space. We want to have the neural activity at all these time points. We want to fit data to the past history states and then predict future states. A very simple, straightforward approach. In my mind, this is a sound approach to essentially generating copies of all we care about from the nervous systems. I've written, a bunch of people have written this, but I've also written a theory of neural emulators. It's on archives now, you can find it. And I basically provide the roadmap, which is scalable whole brain emulation. Basically says, we're going to start with the best technology we have now. We're just going to sample sparsely from the brain and model these little parcels along with the behavior, create a model and see how well it does to replicate the behavior of the organism. I'm going a little fast here, but the idea is that as technology moves and we can get better and better neural recordings, our technology, our models also get better. And we'll also figure out exactly how much more technology do we really need to build? Do we really need to build something that records from 100 billion neurons in the human brain, or like 0.1% enough, right? Most of the neuroscience findings have come from literally 100 neurons, most of computational neuroscience. So we may not need so much, but I'm happy to discuss that more. Yeah, so again, the approach is very similar, I would say, conceptually to computational neuroscience. So we're trying to take data, fit it to some kind of model. Computational neuroscience is actually kind of increasingly relying on deep neural networks. The historical idea, this really famous vision of computational neuroscience, to have this reductionist approach that moves across all these levels of dynamics. We had consciousness, of course, because we're interested in that. We don't have very good mechanisms at all these levels. We know a lot about how molecules do and interact. We still don't have complete pictures here. But as you move off this hierarchy, we know less and less mechanistic, meaning we have a formula, a closed form expression for what the heck the lower level is doing to give rise to the higher level. And these levels in particular are quite difficult to do. I think large scale data will help, but it's not completely clear. What is helping is the artificial neural network. So we can actually replace mechanisms for black boxes. And we're starting to do that. LFADS was this somewhat semi-successful model. I'm just mentioning it. It's not the only one by far, but yeah. So how do we get to functional whole brain emulation? And my approach is neuroethology. I'm happy to hear criticisms or encouragements. I want to do very open arena, open field experiments to really basically let animals explore the space, do their own thing for weeks, months, years if their implants don't fall out of their fail or they don't die from natural causes, basically. And I want to do all kinds of complex systems, environment interactions, including causality experiments. I want to know, how do animals understand themselves as causal agents? I'm happy to talk about that, but I work on neuroscience of agency, and there's a bunch of circuits in the brain that support the feeling of control, that feeling that you're something in the world that has causal power. And this is the rough approach. Of course, for now, I would start with sparse data and thousands of hours of recording. And the question is, like, what is this going to give us? Can we generate actually enough data to create a whole brain emulator? And I have basically a screen grab of spreadsheets. A single mouse with 32 channels of sampling from 32 brain areas gives you about tens of billions of non-sleeping time neural data. If you can get like 20-30 data from 20-30 mice, you approach the trillion data point mark for a month. Sorry, I should make it clear. This is a month of recording in a single animal. And rats, they can carry much larger implants on their brain, usually hundreds of electrodes, and you can get even farther along. 10 rats over a single month of recording information gets you about 500 billion data points. If you want to record from a single animal, so you avoid some complex technical problems about matching data, you can definitely get a trillion data points from a single animal, but you record for quite a few months. And people have done this. This is not novel. I'm not breaking any new ground here. Versions of this have been done. Why is this relevant? Well, because rodent data sets of this size, about trillion data point, are approaching what we've trained language models with, okay? Yeah, I'm probably going to skip over this slide because I'm running a little late, but essentially what we're doing with whole brain emulators is these models we're trying to build, as they get better and better, as we get more and more granular data, they'll get more and more precise. It's kind of what we're doing with language models. It's a very similar process conceptually. I want to tell you about these last two quick things that I've been thinking about. Can we simplify and speed up whole brain emulation or low-fi functional whole brain emulation? Essentially, can we remove humans out of the loop? Indeed, we can. My PhD supervisor years ago, he published these papers where he showed that mice can be trained to, they live in these boxes for days and weeks, and they can self-head fix. They can go in these little chambers, and their brain gets imaged for about 30 to 60 seconds. So could we do that? Could we actually separate the data logger from the implant? So you have these animals that run around. We can. The technology is already there. Basically, you can have a magnet that attaches the battery and the memory card. Right, I didn't make it clear, but we don't have the technology yet to record for 10 to, okay. So that's that. The final bit I wanted to say just about, I'm very excited if people want to talk to me about setting up a European incubator for neuroethology that bypasses university pharma and do it yourself. I'm super happy to talk about that. It's not super expensive. I'm already interviewing people for this place. So that's it, thank you. Oh yeah, my thank you slide.
Maybe then spend 1 more minute on the last slide here.
Oh, I was just going to say that. So the idea here is that that doesn't matter so much. This matters. If you have a neurotech startup that wants to apply your technology or ideas in an in vivo model, you're stuck with some options here. Usually the university path, which is what it is, pharma, which you may not be big enough, or do it yourself. And I already kind of started on this path. We have corporations, and I'm looking for funding to set up an incubator where you can just take your idea. Of course, you need to have some funding and come to us, and we would help you get the license to the research, right? We would have the lab for you, we have the animals, everything else would be there for you. You just need to come with the idea and to test it. Of course, you need to get the science license. And I think there's a space for that. The market's small, but it can be very big if we encourage people in neurotech to approach it. And again, it doesn't have to be a for-profit, it could also be a non-profit that acts as a catalyst for neurotech or behavior neurotech research. Especially, again, this is all for non-human animals for the time being, but of course it could be more than that. But yes.
Are there any examples of sort of this approach? I mean, I guess for sort of whole brain emulation, you have the open worm example, but are there any examples for this approach sort of being successful?
Example, you mean like in mammals, something closer to humans?
I mean, also smaller organisms. I'm entirely new to sort of this field.
Well, I mean, so we're increasingly successful at modeling parts of the brain, input-output, basically, a lot of system neuroscience about sensory processing and sensory processing, and then output is behavior. So we're very good we're increasingly good at modeling individual systems. The question is, nobody's really done, especially ethological, like holistic natural behavior. There's not as much as that, So I also work on behavior science, so I study animal and natural behavior and try to build models of that. So it's a question of data size, I think, before we can answer much more interesting question related to actual digitizing and copying whole brains.
Thank you so much, Catalin.